What Dolly Parton said that made Joy Behar storm off The View. Chaos erupted live as the usually calm host walked out in total disbelief, leaving viewers stunned. What could the legendary singer have said to push Joy over the edge, and what does this shocking moment reveal about tension behind the cameras? Join us as we break down the explosive scene and uncover why Joy left the set without looking back. Join us as we unravel the shocking scene and discover why the legendary host left the live TV show without looking back. The question that shifted everything. For years, Dolly Parton, America's sweetheart, has walked a careful line between personal authenticity and public expectation. She is known for rarely criticizing, rarely engaging in debates, and almost never raising her voice. Her reputation is built on humility and a consciousness of herself in the Hollywood industry. And yet, on live television, a single question, one that could not be overlooked, was asked, and it shifted everything. Dolly appeared as a guest on The View, where Joy Behar served as one of the co-hosts. From the moment Dolly stepped onto the set, the atmosphere changed. The audience buzzed with excitement. It was obvious they were delighted to have such an iconic figure in the studio. Dolly took in the table, the cameras, the audience, and the hosts, a familiar glimmer of warmth and composure settling across her face as she was welcomed in. As the interview began, Dolly answered each question with the gentle, calm face she has always carried on for long. She spoke about her mission, her upbringing, and her childhood shaped by poverty, and how those early years taught her compassion and empathy. She talked about uplifting others and about staying grounded despite decades in the spotlight. These responses warmed the hearts of everyone genuinely. Her words were simple and sincere, yet they carried weight. Her words moved through the energy in the room, and soon it became clear as a question was asked. Joy Behar, who has been observing right from the beginning, leaned forward and spoke, her tone casual but edged with something sharper. "So, Dolly," she said, "you've been doing this a long time, and yet, somehow you've never really changed your image. How is that?" Dolly Parton has always been regarded as someone who knows exactly who she is, answered the question in a normal way that resonated with her values, but still, Joy seemed unconvinced. Joy continued, suggesting that there might be something performative about the consistency Dolly had maintained for so long. She went further, remarking that some people might see the big hair, the sparkles, and the exaggerated femininity she portrayed as outdated. And at that moment, the temperature in the studio shifted. Whoopi Goldberg and another co-host exchanged quick sideways glances. The room went still. Dolly, however, did not move. She did not raise her voice, and the soft smile on her face never disappeared. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, as if carefully choosing each word. "Well, Joy, I've always believed femininity isn't something to be ashamed of. It's just one way of being strong," she said calmly. Joy pressed her lips together before responding, as if looking for more trouble. "But don't you worry that younger women see that and think success means looking a certain way? That being taken seriously requires all the glitter?" she asked. Those questions lingered in the air. They were not an outright attack, but they were far from a compliment. Dolly's fingers rested lightly against each other, her perfectly manicured nails tapping softly once against the glass. "I think young women are smart enough to decide for themselves," she replied. "And I trust them more than I trust labels." Immediately Dolly said those words. The audience applauded. Joy leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. "You've built a brand, and brands can sometimes distract from substance," she said meaningfully. And in that moment, it became clear to everyone in the studio, and especially to Dolly, that the question had never been rooted in curiosity. It was deliberate, a slow, carefully framed challenge to her identity. her choices, and the very persona she had spent a lifetime owning without apology. What do you think happened next, and how was the situation handled by Dolly and everyone present in the studio? The unexpected turn in the situation. Before anyone could realize what was happening, the situation got out of control. However, Joy did not stop. Her posture stiffened, and her tone turned sharp, too fast even than before. Dolly, however, did not mirror the change. Her voice remained on the same level, unbothered, and when she had had enough, Dolly responded, "Questions are meant to be understood. Yours are coming at me like a stone throw to a wound." After that, Joy's smile disappeared, and for a second, something unguarded crossed her face. It was the calculation of intent to push harder, corner Dolly, and get the moment. And she did. Let's cut to the truth. You're not the saint people think you are. You're a businesswoman who sold a fantasy, and you sold it so well, people forgot to ask who you really are, she said. The air in the studio tightened. Even the audience, usually eager, went quiet like they sensed something sacred had been touched. Dolly didn't move, but her shoulders lifted slightly, then settled, like someone bracing, without wanting anyone to notice. Her smile faded, and when she spoke, her voice was calm enough to scare people more than anger ever could. It was a personality different from the warm one she has shown in public for decades, until that moment. "Joy, you keep talking like you know me, and you keep poking, like you're hoping I'll finally snap so you can feel justified." Dolly responded, not aggressively, just as it was. The studio held its breath because Dolly Parton, America's sweetheart, had stopped being sweet, and Joy Behar had just realized she might have pushed the one person in the room who didn't need to raise her voice to destroy a narrative. It didn't end there. Joy opened her mouth to fire back, but Dolly spoke first. "One more question from you like that, and we're going to have a very different kind of conversation." And for the first time all day, Joy didn't have a line ready. However, Joy wasn't the type to retreat. Her outspoken personality won't allow her. She only let out a knowing smile, a thin, sharp, and dangerous one, and the way she did it made the producers behind the cameras reach for their headsets. Because everyone knew now that this was not an interview anymore. It was a collision. The producers should have cut to commercials all along, but no one wants to be the one to pull the cord. Joy Behar adjusted in her seat, clearly energized now. This was what she's good at. Conflict framed as conversation. Dolly sat back slightly, but her softness was gone. What remained was composure and the little calmness she had. Joy cleared her throat. "You know people love to protect you, Dolly. That's fascinating to me. You say one sweet thing, and the audience applauds like you've solved world peace. You talk about kindness and empowerment, but you've never really challenged the system. You benefited from it. You played into it. That's not bravery. That's marketing," Joy said, breaking the thin line that held the peace in the room. The word marketing came out heavy. It was clear it was an intentional attack, and Dolly was not having it. What is the resolution of the fight between Joy and Dolly? Do you think they'd be able to handle matters on their own? The subtle tension and the exit. Dolly inhaled slowly. It was not a pause meant for emphasis or drama, but the kind taken when restraint is what she needs to avoid drama. She spoke evenly, directing her words to Joy and saying she had challenged plenty in her life, just not in the way Joy seemed to admire now. Joy responded with a smirk, remarking that Dolly challenged beauty standards by exaggerating them. A sharp intake of breath moved through the studio, and for the first time, Dolly's gaze hardened. She countered that what was truly ironic was sitting behind a desk and judging women's lives from a distance. This time, the applause that came from the audience was immediate and confident. There was no more hesitation from the audience in supporting who was right. Joy's irritation surfaced openly as she accused Dolly of deflecting, calling her persona calculated and claiming charm was used to avoid scrutiny. Dolly leaned forward slightly and made it clear she had never asked anyone not to question her. Joy then pressed harder, asking why someone so empowered would cling to an image designed by men. The question was not new, but it was relentless, and Dolly held her gaze in silence long enough for the studio to freeze. When she finally spoke, her voice was stripped of warmth. She said she had not clung to anything, she had chosen it. Joy accused her of romanticizing conformity, and Dolly responded that Joy was weaponizing disdain. The exchange landed cleanly, and before Joy could recover, Dolly continued, saying what troubled her most was not Joy's dislike of her appearance or dismissal of her work, but the way Joy spoke as though there was only one acceptable way to exist as a woman, a way that conveniently mirrored herself. The studio erupted, applause surging without restraint, a few audience members standing as Whoopi exhaled sharply, caught between admiration and concern for how the matter turned out. Joy snapped back, accusing Dolly of projection, but Dolly replied quietly that she was simply paying attention. Joy leaned forward, her voice rising as she complained about women like Dolly receiving a free pass because they were pleasant and generous, insisting likability did not exempt anyone from examination. The atmosphere turned intense as Joy raised her voice again, declaring that Dolly's image condescends women and encouraged them to be decorative for acceptance, calling it irresponsible. The silence afterward was unforgiving. Dolly adjusted her jacket with deliberate calm and stated that no one gets to dictate what empowers women. Joy laughed bitterly and told her to save the sermon. But Dolly clarified this was not a sermon. It was a boundary. She explained that for the past 20 minutes, Joy had spoken at her rather than with her, mocking her choices and questioning her integrity. And when Joy attempted to interrupt, Dolly raised her hand to stop the spiral. She said she had stayed because she believed Joy might eventually ask something worth answering, a remark that cracked what remained of Joy's composure. Joy accused her of being dramatic, and Dolly replied that the statement was often said when discomfort replaced control. Joy then stood abruptly, chair scraping loudly, insisting she did not have to sit there and be accused of bullying because it was her show. Dolly responded calmly that this was precisely the issue, but Joy shouted that Dolly did not get to lecture her, and Dolly agreed she did not. But she did get to decide what she would tolerate. The studio went completely silent. Dolly said she had come sincerely, answered the questions, absorbed the tone, and extended grace, placing her mug gently on the table. But she would not remain where respect was optional. Joy scoffed and accused her of walking out, and Dolly replied that Joy was making the decision uncomplicated. Behind the cameras, producers panicked openly. Joy snapped that if Dolly left, that was on her, and Dolly responded firmly that it was not. Applause thundered again as Dolly turned to thank Whoopi for the invitation and express regret over how the conversation had turned, a sentiment Whoopi returned with visible conflict. Joy cut in, saying they were not finished, and Dolly turned back. Their eyes met and Dolly stated softly that they were done. Joy had no response ready and blurted out that if Dolly could not handle hard conversations, she should not be on live television. The words fell flat as Dolly replied that tough conversation was not the same as disrespect, and when Joy dismissed her as upset over being challenged, Joy threw up her hands and told her to walk out, and Dolly looked around the table at the hosts and the audience that had sat in tense silence, nodded once and said she thought she would. Gasps rippled through the studio as she unclipped her microphone carefully and placed it on the table as though returning something borrowed. She said she came to speak about music, literacy, and hope, not to be diminished. She wished Joy well and added she would not stay where kindness was treated as weakness. She then turned and left the set. Moments later, something no one expected followed when Joy Behar quietly stood, adjusted her posture, glanced around the table, and walked away as well without explanation or closing remark, leaving behind only absence. How do you think the public and the fans reacted to the outburst between Dolly and Joy on the show? The public's reaction and media frenzy. The conversation and the exchange of words between Joy and Dolly was swift. It was beyond control and overwhelming, especially for those present during the set. Almost as soon as the broadcast ended, social media platforms ignited with activity, transforming a tense studio exchange into a global conversation. Short clips and videos went round, and soon the situation went round. From screenshots to reaction videos and written commentaries that range from measured reflection to outright outrage. Viewers replayed it repeatedly, each time discovering new details in facial expressions, silences, and the precise timing of words. Some voices were quick to condemn Joy, saying her words were always too sharp. They labeled her a nightmare on the show and her exit impulsive and dismissive, arguing that stepping away from a live discussion contradicted the responsibility that comes with hosting a forum built on debate. Others offered a more sympathetic interpretation on behalf of Dolly. They suggested that being confronted with an unwavering moral stance in real time, without the protection of scripts or editorial distance, can be a whole lot, particularly for someone like Dolly, who was accustomed to changing the narrative rather than being reshaped by it. By morning, the episode had moved firmly into the cultural bloodstream. Headlines referenced it as one of the most discussed moments in daytime television that year, not because it featured shocking revelations or hostility, but because it disrupted a long-established rhythm on the View TV show. Daytime talk shows are designed around predictability, noted disagreement contained within implicit limits, and tension that resolves neatly before the commercial break. But this interview was different. However, what made the moment linger was Dolly's expression during the conversation. Many of the fans loved how she maintained even as the exchange sharpened. Rather than overpowering the moment, she occupied it fully, and in doing so, revealed how fragile live television can be when someone declines to perform the expected role. For some, Joy's exit showed a resistance to being morally cornered. For others, it represented an inability to remain present when control is no longer in her hands. Dolly, meanwhile, was proved to be someone of steadiness, illustrating that conviction does not require cruelty. The matter didn't just end on Dolly and Joy. Several backstage tensions were built up during the show. Behind the scenes. While the cameras focused on Dolly and Joy, a different kind of tension was building backstage. The production crew, usually invisible to viewers, was suddenly on high alert. Headsets buzzed constantly as producers and floor managers tried to keep up with the unexpected intensity. What should have been a normal interview was turning into something unpredictable, and everyone behind the scenes felt the pressure. They had to make split-second decisions. Should they cut to commercial? Adjust the cameras? Alert someone to step in? Every choice carried weight because nothing was going as planned. Camera operators shifted nervously, unsure which angles to capture. Dolly remained calm and composed while Joy's reactions became worrisome. The cameras were focused on both women, but backstage, the crew knew that the story wasn't just in what people were saying, but the pauses and the energy between them. Every shift in tone or body language had to be followed closely because a live broadcast leaves no room for error. Most of the sound engineers leaned in, At every point, they were adjusting the levels, waiting for any raised voices. The producers were not left behind. They whispered to one another, trying to anticipate the next move. For a team used to controlling the flow of conversation, this was unfamiliar and unnerving. The co-hosts could feel it too. Whoopi Goldberg and the others usually thrive on lively debates and playful tension. But this felt different. Any attempt to step in risked making things worse. It was a live TV show, and leaving matters just as they were was the perfect option. The exchange between Dolly and Joy was delicate and sharp at the same time. It was clear that neither of the women would back down, and the usual tricks of redirecting or softening the conversation weren't going to work. Everyone had to wait and watch, careful not to interfere, while the energy continued to rise. Even the audience, though they were part of the broadcast, added to the backstage pressure. Their gasps, murmurs, and applause could be heard just as clearly behind the cameras. The reactions in the room were like feedback that echoed into the control room, reminding the crew that this was no ordinary interview. Every single pause, every glance, every slight change in tone was amplified by the audience's presence. The team realized quickly that this wasn't something that could be managed with quick cuts or jokes. It had to play out in real time. The crew could see the tension in ways the audience at home couldn't. It was more than just a fight on screen. The balance in the studio was delicate, and the production team knew that any small misstep could escalate the moment even further. When Dolly finally stood, unclipped her microphone, and walked away, the energy backstage shifted again. There was relief, but also awe. Everyone had witnessed something extraordinary. A calm, measured person facing tension and keeping control without raising her voice. The crew knew immediately that the moment would be talked about long after the cameras stopped rolling. The hidden tension backstage had been just as intense as what viewers saw on screen. And for those behind the scenes, it made the moment all the more unforgettable. One thing lingered for long in the mind of the audience during and after the show. What was it about? Let's find out. The calmness Dolly showed. After the unresolved confrontation, what made the moment stand out was not the loud exchange of words or tension, but the contrast between expectation and response. In a setting designed towards sharp exchanges and quick retorts, Dolly stood her ground and maintained her composure. Unlike Joy, Dolly did not raise her voice, interrupt, or attempt to overpower the conversation. Instead, she spoke calmly, allowing her words to serve as a real response to questions thrown to her. That restraint changed the atmosphere in the room. Dolly's calmness felt deliberate, but not rehearsed. It was a true sign to the personality she has shown over time. It came across as the natural result of someone who has spent a lifetime understanding who she is and what she stands for. She did not rush to defend herself or explain her worth. She simply spoke from experience. There was no urgency in her tone or a sense of pressure to convince Joy or twist her personal authenticity. In many public conversations, especially on live television, composure is often mistaken for weakness or avoidance. However, Dolly's presence challenged that assumption. She showed that remaining calm by refusing to mirror aggression. The absence of retaliation made the tension more visible, and at the end, Joy was left to confront herself. Ultimately, the calmness Dolly showed became the defining element of the encounter. Even though she walked away, a lot of people saw it as self-respect, and her actions as a means to stand against bullying of any kind. What do you think of the way Joy Behar and Dolly Parton addressed one another? Do you think the situation could have been better off or much worse if someone intervened in the matter? Share your thoughts with us in the comment section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.